Hey guys, so I want to thank you as always for taking the time to check out today's live stream where we're going to be going over the topic of light cardio versus complete rest. So before I do get started in discussing this particular topic and of course get going, I do want to mention a few things with you guys that I've been working on. So here recently, I did upload a video last week to my YouTube channel where I discussed basically the difference between strength machines as well as free weights. And I feel like anybody will find this helpful. In this, I sort of explain, sorry about that, I sort of explain the difference between sort of understanding both, which one is better for beginners as well as which one is more beneficial when it comes to, you know, performing them, in a cohesive way that works towards your particular goal. So I did go over that the other day. That video is available for you to view on YouTube. If you do want the link to my YouTube channel, feel free to let me know. But I just wanted to mention that in advance. Another thing too is that I do want to mention my website, which is bponlinefitness.com. There's a ton of online fitness coaching, as well as free resources that you can check out. I do have a free blog that I upload to each and every Friday, and I also send out email newsletter each and every Monday. If you sign up to the email list at the bottom of the page, you can receive that. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely check that out. I believe that's it for today that I wanted to mention before I got started. But definitely check out those. Oh, I should have mentioned one more thing. On Tuesdays here recently, I just started doing TikTok live streams. So every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time on my TikTok, I will be doing a live stream that will have a unique topic to that platform. So I won't repeat the same topic. So yesterday I did a topic on active recovery, which somewhat relates to this, but it's a little bit different in what I discussed there. And then on Thursday, which will be tomorrow at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, at the same time that I do these streams, tomorrow I'll be doing an X Spaces sort of podcast discussion where I'll be talking about a little bit about sort of core exercise and things of that nature in that particular X Spaces discussion. So if you're interested in that, feel free to let me know. That's more of a podcast, so it is, of course, just audio, but definitely check that out. I try to give out some more detailed information in that maybe I don't normally do when we're doing these streams, just the regular live streams, but definitely check that out. So, with all that being said, guys, let's go ahead and get started with talking about today's topic, which is light cardio versus complete rest. So, you may be wondering why this is the topic for the day and why we're sort of discussing this topic. And the reason being is that with this topic, we're going to be talking about various different things. There's a little bit more to this than meets the eye. So, these are some of the points that we're going to go over in this particular topic. We're going to discuss active recovery defined. And like I mentioned, I did touch a little bit about active recovery yesterday, but I didn't dive too far deep into it in my TikTok stream. So, what we discussed today is going to be a little bit more in depth than what I discussed there if you did listen to that. So, another thing too is that we're going to talk about complete rest and how it's unique versus when we're talking about active recovery. The physiology behind recovery choices. We're also going to go over light cardio for circulation and mobility, hormonal and nervous system recovery, as well as signs you need complete rest instead of movement, customizing recovery based on training phase, and the role of nutrition on recovery days. So, for this topic, our main sort of discussion is over understanding the difference between incorporating more active recovery days in your routine versus whether we want to incorporate more complete rest into our routine. So that's the main sort of overarching point that we're sort of discussing here. So let's get started with really understanding what active recovery is. Active recovery basically means performing low intensity movement that keeps your body in motion without causing further fatigue. Now, like I mentioned, I did discuss a little bit about this yesterday on TikTok, but there are a few things that I want to sort of expand upon when we're talking about active recovery. So, active recovery in itself is basically performing non-structured based, exercise, in other words. So you're not going to be doing like a normal weightlifting routine like you would, any other day. You're not going to be, in your overall workout routine, you're not going to be performing exercises in the same way when it comes to active recovery. Active recovery is basically used for your rest days. And when you're using active recovery, some of the movements that are involved are like walking, cycling, swimming, yoga, mobility based exercises, and some light resistance band sort of exercises. So it is somewhat structured, but it's not as structured as when we're talking about our normal weightlifting routine, where we're going through, a warm up phase, we're, stretching and preparing, that warm up phase for our muscles that we're targeting that day. And then we're kind of going through our workout and then going through a cool down. So when you approach active recovery, it's not as structured in that way. You may include some movements, some exercises, but you're not focusing on really higher intensity like you would when it comes to weightlifting and strength training. So the goal here is to boost circulation. It's also to clear metabolic waste in the body, which would be lactate and CO2. It enhances tissue repair at the same time, and also helps to maintain mobility and muscle elasticity. So active recovery is not just, of course, benefiting the body in multiple ways, as far as repairing, muscle repair and growth, but it's also helping you to prepare as you're going into your workouts again. It's giving your body that refresh, and it makes you a little bit stronger as you're going into that, workout routine. So the next point is understanding complete rest. Now, what I do want to mention before we sort of talk about, complete rest, and complete rest is pretty much self-explanatory. There's not much that I would have to tell you here, but I do want to mention that you have to understand, based on how you feel, whether you should incorporate more complete rest or active recovery. Sometimes active recovery may not be best if you are extremely fatigued, you are just kind of weighed down. So you kind of have to, sort of determine what type of method is better for you. So there's many different reasons for incorporating complete rest. So maybe there's a time where you were doing your exercises and you may have done quite a bit. You maybe have lacked in sleep throughout the week, but you got through your workout routine. Maybe for your rest day, you would want to sort of incorporate a more complete rest in order to help your body sort of fully recover, since your routine was kind of on and off throughout the week. So that's what you would, when you would actually incorporate that sort of complete rest in your routine. And I just wanted to mention that in advance. Because sometimes, most of the time you want to focus on active recovery. That's the main thing that you should focus on. But sometimes if we're extremely fatigued and we do need, sort of a complete rest, that is necessary. So a full recovery period where there's no physical activity performed. So you're not performing any particular exercises. So again, this allows the body to replenish energy stores, repair muscle tissue, and restore hormonal balance. So this does, of course, have the same benefits with a structured routine. Having complete rest still has those same different benefits, but it's giving a more deeper recovery process than when we're talking about active recovery. So, of course, this prioritizes deep recovery, sleep, nutrition, and hydration. Now, even if you're focusing on incorporating a complete rest day, your nutrition, your sleep, and your hydration should still be in check. You should still be maintaining a proper, you know, nutrition, sort of meal plan, as well as getting, proper amount of hydration day to day, and of course, getting the proper amount of sleep. Sleep is another essential part of muscle repair and growth because when we have a consistent sleep schedule and we get enough sleep throughout the night, it does help our body really maximize that muscle repair and growth. So let's continue on here and talk about basically the physiology behind recovery. So there's many different points that I'm going to go over here, of course, including muscle repair, nervous system reset, as well as circulation and nutrient delivery. So intense training, of course, itself causes micro tears in the muscle fibers. And what recovery does when we're talking about recovery, active or complete, rest and recovery, what this does is activates that protein synthesis process, which in turn is rebuilding fibers to be thicker and stronger. When on a macro level, whenever our muscle fibers are tearing when we're working out, this isn't a bad thing. This is a natural part of, the hypertrophy process and the strength process where we are tearing those fibers so that they can build stronger. And that's what makes the muscles look bigger is because we tear those down, we're recovering, we're getting proper nutrients in our body, and that's what's, building that appearance in our physique at the same time, not only in how we feel, as far as our strength and being able to lift, but also in our physique. So, of course, this is where hypertrophy happens, not during training, but after. Recovery is a big, big chunk of your results. A lot of people really think about workouts in themselves as being the main, brunt of, getting the results, but it's not necessarily that way. A lot of your day is consistent, consisted basically of more nutrition, more of your recovery, your sleep, and what you do day to day. So your workouts are only going to play, an hour and a half or an hour of your day, maybe sometimes less. It's only going to play that specific part. Of course, when we approach our workouts, we need to be, really mindful and intentional when we go into those workouts so that we're making the most of that hour, hour and a half time, but just know that your recovery is what's really, helping to lead to that sort of muscle growth and that, hypertrophy that you're looking for. So again, training breaks down and recovery builds up. So another thing too is that the nervous system is being enacted in a lot of, hard training days and, really higher intensity training. So hard training taxes the central and peripheral nervous system. So recovery in itself restores coordination, balance, and motor control. So when we are having our nervous system reset, it influences basically our performance in our workout because a lot of what the nervous system is doing is a lot of our motor control, a lot of our, focus and just our overall coordination and how we're performing our exercises. So when we take time to sort of rest and recover, we're resetting that system. So without recovery, you're going to have neural fatigue, which is going to impact the performance that you have in your workout routine. So this can reduce strength, focus, and performance. Circulation and nutrient delivery. So there's an increased blood flow that is being brought or brings oxygen, amino acids, and glucose to the damaged tissues. So whenever those tissues are damaged, there's an increased amount of blood flow So again, the damaged tissue is the muscle tissue that we're talking about that's being torn as we're doing workouts. So this is increasing that blood flow and oxygen in the body and is, bringing those nutrients it needs, amino acids and glucose, which glucose is an energy system. And what this is leading to is capillary dilation, which helps to remove waste like lactic acid and speed repair. So, active recovery, like I just mentioned, active recovery helps a lot with your circulation. That's why, one thing I always encourage as much as possible is that my clients focus on active recovery days as far as when they're doing rest days. Again, when think of active recovery as really low intensity movement. You're not doing exercise that's, making it hard to breathe, or you're not doing those really heavy exercises. You're doing exercise that allows you to carry on a conversation. That's really how you know the intensity level. If you can carry on a conversation in the exercise, that's where you sort of know how intense something is. And with this type of movement and exercise, when we're talking about active recovery, we are talking about extremely low intensity. So we're not taxing, the body. We're helping it to recover while still keeping it active. So again, active recovery is going to enhance this process by keeping blood moving at a low intensity. So hormonal and nervous system recovery. So like I just mentioned, your central nervous system is being taxed a lot of times when you're doing higher intensity training, weightlifting, and things of that nature. So this is what is helping controlling strength, coordination, and focus as you're going through your workouts, the CNS. So intense lifting again drains that neural energy and delays muscle activation if not recovered. So if you have an overloaded central nervous system, again, this is going to lead to fatigue, poor performance, and slow muscle recruitment. You're not going to get as many muscle fibers that are going to be engaged in your workout. So again, recovery is helping to restore that neural drive and reaction time. Whenever I was, and I've touched on this before, but I do want to mention it because it does kind of connect to what we're talking about here today. Whenever I, before I had become a trainer and I was sort of building out my workout routine, again, not having the knowledge that I have now, one of the things that I used to do is that I used to work out 7 days a week. And see, at the time, I felt like I would get the results faster if I worked out, 7 days straight and just kept going. Like I felt like the results would come faster. But when I had got to the point where I was continuing to do this and continuing to push myself, it became to where my performance in my exercises were really sort of slowing down. I wasn't able to, really make the most of them as I kept going, day after day doing this. And so that's what we're talking about here is that when we're continuing to work out and we're not incorporating rest days, we're taxing our system so much that it's really reducing our impact on our workouts. It's reducing that performance because our mind's not fully recovered, our body's not fully recovered. So it's affecting our performance whenever, it's really slowing down our results when we just consistently, continue to keep working out without adding those strategic rest days in our routine. So this matters. It's important to add those rest days in your routine. Even if you're somebody like me who is like trying to get the results or, somebody that wants to get the results quick, you still have to slow down. You have to slow down at certain points so that your body can sort of catch up. So your mind, you may have a mindset to where you want to keep going, but you have to let your body take time because what you think in your mind is different than how your body's going to feel. Like it's weird, but it's like we're disconnected sometimes with, we think we need to do this, and then you know, our body is really strained, but then our mind is like we want to just keep going. But you got to have a balance. You have to balance and how you approach exercise in a way to where you're not overloading your system, but you're giving your body, the proper rest it needs. And so that's an example there of, you know, that's how it was for me. When I started to add rest days, I noticed a major difference in how I was able to approach workouts, and it gave me enough time, it gave my body enough time to sort of get back into that rhythm with the rest days. So just keep that in mind. So training itself is, of course, leading to a stress, and it's raising cortisol. So cortisol is, of course, a stress hormone in the body. And when you have an elevated amount of cortisol, it's going to reduce your muscle repair process. So what proper recovery does is that it's lowering this cortisol while raising anabolic hormones. Now, if you're not aware, anabolic hormones are hormones that are helping to aid in muscle growth. And there is another term that I've mentioned before. So you have anabolic, which is the muscle gain sort of hormones, and then you have catabolic, which is actually a breakdown of the muscles in a bad way. So that's what you're going to kind of have is sort of a catabolic breakdown of muscle when you don't have sort of proper, you know, rest in your routine and proper recovery. So again, when you add that proper recovery in your routine, you're going to lower that cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and it's going to raise your anabolic hormones. So this includes growth hormone, repair tissues, and mobilizes fat for energy. Testosterone is increased, and this is increasing, of course, protein synthesis and muscle mass. Insulin helps to shuttle nutrients into muscle cells for glycogen and repair in the body. So, as I mentioned, you have to sort of know when to incorporate complete rest and when to sort of approach, doing active recovery. So here are some signs to keep in mind to know whether you need to incorporate a more complete rest day in your routine. So if you notice persistent fatigue, this could be, feeling tired even after sleeping. Everyday activities or warm-ups are feeling harder than usual, or your usual energy or motivation to train is low. This may be a sign that you need more complete recovery in a day where you take time away from your workouts. Prolonged muscle soreness. So if you have, or joint pain, if you have soreness that's lasting longer than 72 hours, your joints feel achy, stiff, and inflamed, your recovery between session takes noticeably longer. So if you're feeling that, even if you're incorporating sort of a more active recovery day, but then you're sort of still feeling this sort of fatigue and, sort of aching, then maybe that is a sign that you need more complete, sort of rest day. Another option, or another sign to think about is decreased strength or performance. So if lifts that normally feel easy suddenly feel heavy, slower reaction times, or poor coordination in workouts, pump or endurance drops despite good nutrition. This may be a sign that you may need more, complete rest day in your routine. So keep all of these different points in mind as approach your rest day and determine whether you need to add complete rest or active recovery. So customizing recovery based on tracing phases. So this is something that I actually do for clients, and recovery kind of changes, how you approach, adding sort of recovery, based phases in your routine, and how you approach recovery is going to change as you increase intensity, as you sort of shift how you approach your workouts. A lot of things are going to change. So stabilization endurance is usually the first phase that I always assign clients. And what this primary phase is to help build control, coordination, and joint stability. So with this particular phase, we're using more body weight and lighter movements. So we're more focused on mastering movement patterns that are going to help aid us in, performing, weightlifting based exercises. So this can include light movement, mobility work. This could include foam rolling and stretching daily. Of course, you want to emphasize sleep, hydration for the nervous system balance. So the best tools here are walking, yoga, breathing work, and gentle foam rolling. So for stabilization and endurance, for this particular phase of exercises, this is sort of the type of recovery that you would want to focus on. So you wouldn't focus on really extreme methods, of course. We're just focusing on really light stretching, foam rolling, walking, and light cardio here and there. The strength endurance phase is the next phase from stabilization endurance. And this phase is basically when you start to incorporate, a little bit more movement patterns as well as incorporating more weightlifting based movements that are, a little bit more challenging, of course. So the recovery focus here is alternating between high and low intensity days. So you're using active recovery. So active recovery is the main focus here on our rest days. So what we would include is light cardio or dynamic mobility. So dynamic mobility is, of course, basically doing more body weight based, sort of mobility, circuit based exercises, things of that nature. You're doing those types of sort of recovery, methods when it comes to, active recovery for strength endurance. You want to keep protein and electrolytes consistent, so having an adequate, protein intake is going to help give your body the nutrients it needs for muscle repair and hypertrophy. So the best tools here can be contrast showers, mobility circuits, and balanced nutrition. So keep that in mind that when we're talking about contrast showers, that can be, more colder showers. This is not something that's necessary for everybody, but it is something to, sort of think about as we approach recovery and think about, different methods that'll help aid in that recovery process. So the role of nutrition on recovery days. So nutrition, as I mentioned over and over again, plays a huge role in how we gain muscle, how our body sort of repairs, and how it, gets the nutrients it needs to help, reach us towards our goal. So we're talking about nutrition. The main points to keep in mind with nutrition is, of course, your macronutrients. Macronutrients are, of course, protein, carbs, and fats. So when we're talking about protein, this is helping to aid the body in helping to repair and rebuild. So this keeps muscle protein synthesis active. Now we're talking about muscle protein synthesis, even though that sounds like a big term, all that means is that's the repair process. That's the body repairing sort of those micro tears, as we mentioned before, in our training. So this is preventing muscle breakdown, which what I mentioned before, muscle breakdown is known as being catabolic. So it's hindering growth. So when you're adding adequate protein in your diet, this is helping to aid in preventing that muscle breakdown. So this is helping to prevent that breakdown during lower activity. Aim for zero point 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight and spread evenly throughout the day when we're talking about protein. Some of the examples can include chicken, eggs, fish, Greek yogurt, and whey protein. Another option, of course, or another thing to consider when we're talking about nutrition on recovery days is carbs as a way to refill and refuel. So carbs are very important. They help to replenish glycogen stores used during training. Carbs are an energy source. You get energy from carbs, so it's helping with your performance and really, having you to be more, alert in your workouts. So what this does is it's going to help support recovery hormones and keep your energy stable. So choose complex carbs. You don't want to choose simple carbs. You want to choose complex carbs, which are the best kinds of carbs. This can be oats, rice, potatoes, fruit, and quinoa, particularly brown rice if possible, And of course, sweet potatoes are a really good option. But potatoes in general are great, but I think sweet potatoes are some of the best when it comes to carbs. But just keep those sort of options in mind. Fats are another important one. So this is helping with a lot of your hormone support and inflammation control. So fats do a lot of regulation sort of with the hormones and sort of activating those different, hormones in the body. So this aids in production of growth and recovery hormones like testosterone. So what this also does too is this provides anti-inflammatory nutrients for joint and tissue repair. So you're helping again when you have that inflammation that happens from your workouts and you incorporate, healthy fats, of course, in your diet. This is going to help with that joint and tissue repair from your workouts. So some sources to keep in mind are avocados, nuts, olive oil, salmon, chia seeds, flax seeds can be another option. There's a lot of options when it comes to healthy fats. And it seems like most of the time, a lot of people have sort of trouble adding healthy fats in their diet. But the best way to think about it is to, like with olive oil can be used in a lot of different ways. It's a good, healthy fat to use. I use it when I, make grilled chicken. I use it all the time. I mean, you can use it for like maybe when you're making eggs or anything like that. And that still is going to count for healthy fat, as you're tracking your nutrition. So make sure that, when you track nutrition, this is another topic in itself, but think about sort of any oils that you use, any sort of seasonings, and incorporate that as your sort of calorie macro intake. Um, Another thing too, like nuts and, salmon, any option like that. There's all kinds of options that you can include for more healthy fats. So just think of all of these different points. These are all your, essential macronutrients you need, but these are also helping and sort of the recovery days in your workouts. Alrighty, guys. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I really hope that you found this helpful and valuable. I do have some information here on screen where you can check out my website. You can, of course, email me at brendanhart95@gmail.com. And I also have my phone number here on screen as well. So if you have any questions, if you, are interested in online fitness coaching, feel free to let me know. Um, but definitely check out all that information. I will, of course, want to mention that all of these live streams are archived. So if you are unable to, of course, watch them at any time, they will be archived on my YouTube channel. I'll also add them to Rumble as well as Odyssey. So if you ever watch videos there, you can check them out there as well. But I try to keep them archived to where, it gets the largest amount of audience and other people can see sort of this content outside of just Facebook and YouTube. So definitely check that out. But thank you guys once again for taking the time to listen to this live stream and watch this live stream. I hope that this information was helpful and that it gave you some insight on how you can approach active recovery versus sort of, complete rest. So think about all of the points that we mentioned. I hope that you took some notes on this. And again, this is stuff that you can take with you. It's not just stuff that I'm talking about. This is valuable stuff that can be used in a workout routine starting today. So just think about how you can incorporate, strategically adding rest days into your routine. So thank you guys once again. I will have another live stream next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. I will be on X Spaces tomorrow at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. So if you're interested in listening there, definitely check that out. So thank you guys once again, and I will see you guys in the next one.